They say justice is blind. But on a sunny Tuesday in the wealthy enclave of Willowbrook, it was deaf, dumb, and incredibly stupid. When Officer Ronan Blaine saw a black woman pruning roses in front of a $3 million estate, he didn't see a federal district court judge. He saw a suspect. He didn't see the woman who signs his search warrants. He saw a trespasser. In less than 20 minutes, Blaine destroyed his career, bankrupted the city's insurance policy for the year, and learned a painful lesson about who you're actually handcuffing. This is the story of how one arrogant badge turned a quiet afternoon into a $750,000 mistake. The hydrangeas were being stubborn. That was the only thought occupying the mind of the Honorable Elara Voss as she knelt on the cooling pad, her knees protected from the slate walkway. At 54, Elara had the kind of presence that could silence a courtroom with a single arched eyebrow. She was known in the Federal District of Northern Illinois as the Iron Gavel, a jurist who suffered no fools and accepted no excuses. But here in the driveway of her French colonial home in the prestigious suburb of Ashford Heights, she wasn't a federal judge. She was just Elara fighting a losing battle against the late summer aphids. She wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of a gardening glove. She was dressed in her Saturday worst, a faded University of Chicago oversized t-shirt, paint-stained cargo shorts, and a bandana wrapped around her braids to keep the humidity at bay. It was the only time she felt truly anonymous. No robes, no clerks scrambling for files, no defendants pleading for leniency. The neighborhood was quiet. It usually was. Ashford Heights was the kind of place where the houses were set back 200 feet from the road, hidden behind wrought iron gates and weeping willows. It was old money mixed with new tech wealth, a place where neighbors waved from Range Rovers but rarely crossed property lines. Elara had lived here for 6 years, ever since her appointment to the federal bench was confirmed by the Senate. She was one of only 3 black families in the development, a statistic she was well aware of, though it rarely impacted her daily peace until today. A black and white SUV rolled slowly down the street. Elara didn't look up initially. Private security patrols were common here, and the local police often did slow rolls to reassure the taxpayers that their property taxes were hard at work. But the car didn't pass. The crunch of gravel under heavy tires stopped directly in front of her driveway. Elara sat back on her heels, squinting against the sun. It was an Ashford Heights Police Department cruiser, Unit 402. She didn't recognize the driver. She knew Chief Tariq Lang quite well. They played bridge at the club occasionally, and she knew most of the senior sergeants. But the silhouette behind the wheel of Unit 402 was unfamiliar. The engine idled for a long, uncomfortable minute. Elara returned to her hydrangeas, assuming the officer was checking a GPS or typing a report. She snipped a dead head off a purple bloom. Then the door opened. The officer who stepped out looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in insecurity. He was young, thick-necked, with a buzz cut so tight it showed scalp. His uniform was too crisp, his boots too shiny, and his hand rested casually but possessively on his utility belt. He didn't put his cap on. He just walked up the driveway with a swagger that screamed he was looking for something to do. "Afternoon," he called out. It wasn't a greeting, it was a probe. Elara shaded her eyes. "Good afternoon, officer. Can I help you?" "Just doing a routine patrol," he said, stopping about 10 feet from her. He looked past her, scanning the front door of the house, the windows, the 3-car garage. "Homeowners are out of town." Elara paused. The assumption was subtle, but it landed with the weight of a stone. "Excuse me, the homeowners?" The officer repeated slower this time, as if speaking to a child. "Mr. and Mrs. whoever. They out for the day?" Elara stood up. Even in her gardening clothes, she had perfect posture. She peeled off her gloves slowly. "I am the homeowner, officer." The officer let out a short, dismissive huff of air, a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. He looked at her paint-stained shorts, the faded t-shirt, the bandana. Then he looked at the massive oak double doors of the house behind her. "Right," he said, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Look, ma'am, we've had reports of soliciting in the area. Unlicensed landscaping crews, people going door to door. Just need to see some ID, check your permit, and I'll be on my way." "I am not a landscaper," Elara said, her voice dropping an octave into her bench tone. "And I am not soliciting. I live here, and I certainly don't carry identification in my gardening shorts." "You don't live here," the officer said flatly. The pretense of politeness vanished instantly. "I patrol this sector every day. I know who belongs and who doesn't." "Then you haven't been doing a very good job," Elara countered. "My name is Elara Voss. I have owned this property for 6 years now. If you'll excuse me, I have pruning to finish." She turned her back on him. It was a test of his training, his temperament, and his common sense. He failed. "Hey." The officer's voice cracked like a whip. "I didn't say you could walk away. Turn around now." Elara froze. The hydrangeas were forgotten. The sanctuary was breached. She took a deep breath, calculating the situation. She knew the law better than he ever would. She knew her rights, but she also knew the statistics. She knew that being right didn't stop a bullet, and it didn't stop a taser. She turned around slowly, keeping her hands visible. "Officer, you are making a mistake. A very expensive mistake. I suggest you get back in your vehicle and call your supervisor." "I don't need my supervisor to deal with a trespasser giving me attitude." He snarled, closing the distance between them. "I asked for ID. You refused. That's failure to identify. That's obstruction. Failure to identify requires reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed," Elara said calmly, citing Terry versus Ohio without even thinking about it. "Gardening while black is not a crime, officer." She glanced at his nameplate. "Blaine. Ronan Blaine." Blaine's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with the blue of his uniform. He wasn't used to people quoting case law. He was used to fear. He was used to compliance. "Last warning," Blaine said, unclipping the radio from his shoulder, but keeping his other hand hovering near his holster. "Get on the ground. Hands behind your head." Elara Voss, federal district judge for the Northern District of Illinois, stared at the 20-something-year-old rookie. "No," she said. The silence that followed her refusal was deafening. A blue jay squawked from the oak tree above, the only witness to the standoff. Ronan Blaine blinked. He had clearly rehearsed this scenario in his head 1,000 times. The hero cop taking down the defiant suspect. But the script wasn't working. The suspect wasn't running. She wasn't screaming. She was standing there with the stillness of a statue, looking at him with eyes that seemed to dissect his very soul. "I'm not going to ask you again," Blaine shouted, his voice echoing off the brick facade of the house. He was performing now, performing for the dash cam he knew was running, performing for the invisible audience in his head that demanded he assert dominance. "Get on the ground. You are under arrest for trespassing, disorderly conduct, and resisting an officer." "Trespassing on my own property?" Elara asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Officer Blaine, listen to me very carefully. Inside that front door, on the console table, is my purse. Inside that purse is my badge. I am a federal judge. If you put your hands on me, your life as you know it will end." "Federal judge," Blaine mocked. "Yeah, and I'm the King of England. You think I'm stupid? You think I haven't heard every lie in the book?" He lunged. It happened fast, clumsy, and violent. Blaine closed the gap and grabbed Elara's left wrist, twisting it behind her back with excessive force. Pain shot up her shoulder, sharp and hot. "Officer, stop," she gasped, the dignity of the courtroom momentarily replaced by the shock of physical assault. "You are hurting me." "Stop resisting!" Blaine screamed, the universal mantra of the aggressor. He swept her legs. Elara hit the ground hard. Her knees, already sore from the gardening, slammed into the gravel driveway. The breath was knocked out of her. Her cheek was pressed against the rough stones. She tasted dirt and blood where she had bitten her lip. "Get your hands back. Get them back." Blaine was panting, adrenaline flooding his system. He jammed his knee into the small of her back, pinning her down. The weight was crushing. "I am not resisting," Elara wheezed. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into her wrists. Click, click, tight, too tight. Blaine yanked her up by the chain of the handcuffs, forcing her to her feet with a groan. She stumbled, disoriented. Her bandana had fallen off, and her braids were covered in dust. The expensive t-shirt was torn at the shoulder. "You have the right to remain silent," Blaine recited, shoving her toward the cruiser. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." "I know the Miranda warning, you idiot," Elara snapped, her anger finally overriding her shock. "I've recited it more times than you've had hot meals." "Shut up." Blaine slammed her against the hood of the car. The metal was hot from the engine. He patted her down, a rough, invasive frisk that made Elara's skin crawl. He checked her pockets, pulling out a pair of pruning shears and tossing them onto the driveway like a murder weapon. "Weapon secure," he muttered to himself. He opened the back door of the cruiser and shoved her inside. The hard plastic seat was cramped and smelled of stale vomit and disinfectant. The cage. She was in the cage. Elara Voss closed her eyes. She fought back the tears of humiliation. She needed her mind sharp. She needed to compartmentalize. She wasn't a victim right now. She was a lawyer preparing a case. Exhibit A, no probable cause. Exhibit B, excessive force. Exhibit C, racial profiling. From the front seat, she heard Blaine radioing dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Unit 402. One in custody, female, black, approximately 50s. Refused ID, combative, trespassing at 520 Crestview Drive. Bringing her in." "Copy 402. The dispatcher's voice crackled. "Did you confirm homeowner status?" Subject was uncooperative. Blaine lied smoothly. "Claimed to be a judge. Yeah, right. Probably high or casing the place for a crew." Elara leaned forward as much as the cuffs would allow. "Officer Blaine, look at the mailbox. Look at the name on the mailbox." Blaine ignored her. He put the car in reverse, the tires crunching over the gravel and over Elara's favorite gardening gloves. As they pulled away, Elara looked back at her house. The front door was still locked. Her phone was inside on the kitchen counter. Her husband, Barrett, was at a medical conference in Boston. No one knew where she was. She was alone in the system she had dedicated her life to upholding. "You're making a big mistake," she said one last time. Blaine looked at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes cold and satisfied. "The only mistake, lady, was you thinking you could mouth off to the police in this town. You don't belong here, and we're going to make sure you learn that." He turned onto the main road, flipping on his siren for no reason other than to punctuate his victory. Elara sat back against the hard plastic. A cold resolve settled in her stomach. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. It was the feeling she got right before she delivered a maximum sentence. He wants to teach me a lesson, she thought. Fine. Class is in session. The ride to the station was a 10-minute blur of suburban streets and simmering rage. Elara sat in the back, her wrists throbbing against the metal cuffs. She had stopped speaking. There was no point in engaging with Officer Blaine anymore. He had crossed the Rubicon. Every word he said now, every action he took was just another nail in the coffin of his career. She closed her eyes and began to memorize details. The time on the dashboard clock, the speed he was driving, 45 in a 30 zone. The way he was humming along to a country song on the radio, completely oblivious to the radioactive material he was transporting in his back seat. They pulled into the sally port of the Ashford Heights Police Department. The heavy garage door rattled shut behind them, plunging the bay into artificial fluorescent light. Out, Blaine barked, opening the back door. He grabbed her arm again, unnecessarily rough. Elara stepped out, her legs stiff. She held her head high, despite the dirt on her face and the torn t-shirt. She walked into the booking area, not like a criminal, but like she was inspecting the facility. The booking sergeant, a weary-looking man named Declan Novak, with graying temples and a coffee stain on his shirt, looked up from his computer. He saw Blaine dragging in a middle-aged black woman in gardening clothes. "What do we have here, Ronan?" Novak asked, leaning back in his chair. "Trespassing?" Blaine announced proudly, dumping Elara's pruning shears onto the counter with a loud clatter. "Caught her at the old Majestic place on Crestview Drive. Refused ID, resisted arrest, combative." Novak looked at the shears, then at Elara. He frowned. "Gardening shears? You arrested a gardener for trespassing." "She claims she lives there." Blaine scoffed, beginning to empty Elara's pockets. He pulled out a crumpled tissue and a few stray petals. "Says she's a federal judge." Novak paused. He looked at Elara properly for the first time. He saw the fire in her eyes. It wasn't the manic glint of the meth heads they usually brought in, nor the desperate fear of the teenagers caught shoplifting. It was a cold, hard, intellectual fury. "Name?" Novak asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "My name is Elara Voss," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "I am a United States District Judge for the Northern District of Illinois. I demand to make a phone call immediately." Blaine laughed. "See, she sticks to the bit. I got to give her credit for commitment. Book her. Jane Doe if you have to until we get prints. I'm charging her with assault on an officer, too. She tried to swing those shears at me." Elara's head snapped toward him. "That is a lie, a verifiable lie. Your dash cam will prove it." "My dash cam was obstructed," Blaine muttered, a malicious smile playing on his lips. Novak looked between the two of them. He had known Blaine for 2 years. The kid was a hothead, a legacy hire whose uncle was a councilman, but this felt wrong. "Ma'am," Novak said, trying to be diplomatic, "if you really are who you say you are, just give us your fingerprints and we can sort this out." "I will give you nothing but a lawsuit until I get my phone call," Elara stated. "I want to speak to Chief Tariq Lang." "Now the chief is in a budget meeting," Blaine snapped. "He doesn't have time for crazy ladies. Prints. Now." He grabbed her hand and forced it onto the scanner. Elara didn't fight him physically. That would only add to the charges. But she didn't help. She let her hand go limp. Blaine pressed her thumb down hard onto the glass, smearing it. Again, the machine beeped. "Stop resisting," Blaine yelled, twisting her finger. "I'm not resisting," Elara whispered through gritted teeth. After 4 tries, the machine finally accepted the prints. "Get her in the holding cell," Blaine said, wiping his hands on his pants as if she were contagious. "I got a mountain of paperwork to do if I'm going to make these charges stick." "You have no idea." Elara said softly as he led her to the cell. The cell was a small concrete box with a metal bench and a toilet that smelled of bleach and urine. Blaine shoved her inside and slammed the bar door. "Enjoy your stay, Your Honor," he mocked, emphasizing the title with dripping sarcasm. He turned the key and walked away, whistling. Elara sat on the cold metal bench. She took a deep breath, counting to 10. She examined her wrists. They were bruised and swelling. She checked her knees. The skin was broken. She wasn't just angry. She was terrified. Not for herself. She knew she would eventually get out, but for every other person who looked like her and didn't have a presidential appointment and a law degree to protect them. If Blaine could do this to her in broad daylight, in her own driveway, what was he doing to the young men on the other side of the tracks at night? She leaned her head against the cinder block wall. Just wait, she told herself. Just wait until the system wakes up. 20 minutes passed. To Elara, it felt like 20 years. To Officer Blaine, it was just enough time to grab a Monster energy drink and start typing his fiction novel of an arrest report. At the front desk, Sergeant Novak was watching the computer screen. The automated fingerprint identification system, AFIS, was processing. Usually for a local vagrant, it took a while, but sometimes when you hit a hit on a serious database, it came back fast. The computer let out a sharp, distinct ping. A red banner flashed across the top of the screen. Priority alert. Federal database. Match. Novak frowned. What the? He clicked the notification. The file opened. It wasn't a criminal record. It was a government personnel file, a high-level clearance file. Subject, Voss Elara Marie, DOB, status, active. Title, District Judge, U.S. District Court, Northern District of Illinois. Security clearance Tier 5, background investigation complete. Novak felt the blood drain from his face. He felt his stomach drop all the way to his shoes. He looked at the photo on the screen. It was a professional headshot. Elara in her black robes, the American flag behind her, looking stern and powerful. He looked at the live feed of the holding cell. The woman in the dirty t-shirt and cargo shorts was sitting with the exact same posture. "Oh, God," Novak whispered. "Oh, sweet Jesus." He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. "Blaine," he roared. Blaine poked his head out of the break room, a half-eaten donut in his mouth. "What's up, Sarge? We get a hit on the crazy lady? She wanted for armed robbery?" Novak didn't answer. He was already grabbing the phone, his hands shaking as he dialed the chief's private line. "Blaine, get your ass out here," Novak ordered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and rage. "Now!" Blaine sauntered out, wiping sugar off his lip. "What's the panic? Did she hang herself?" "Look at the screen." Novak pointed a shaking finger at the monitor. "Look at the screen." Blaine leaned in, squinting. He read the text. He read it again. He looked at the photo. He looked at the name. For a second, his brain refused to process it. It had to be a mistake. A hacker. A glitch. "It's fake," Blaine said, his voice cracking. She must have stolen an identity. That's it. She's an identity thief. Good catch, Sarge. That's another felony." "You idiot!" Novak screamed, losing all composure. "That is the Department of Justice database. You can't fake a Tier 5 clearance. You arrested a federal judge. You arrested a federal judge in her own driveway." Just then, the double doors of the station flew open with a bang. Chief Tariq Lang didn't walk in. He stormed in. And he wasn't alone. Behind him were two men in the dark suits with earpieces, private security for the gated community, who had seen the arrest on their cameras and recognized the judge. "Where is she?" Lang bellowed. His face was purple. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. Blaine shrank back against the wall. He had never seen the chief this angry. "Chief, Shut your mouth!" Lang pointed a finger at Blaine that was trembling with fury. "Don't you speak, don't you breathe. Where is Judge Voss?" "Cell 2, Novak squeaked. Lang didn't wait. He actually ran down the hallway toward the holding cells, grabbing the master key ring from his belt. Blaine stood frozen in the booking room. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. He looked at Novak. "Sarge, I followed protocol. She refused ID. She was resisting." Novak looked at him with pure pity. "Ronan, you better hope she's the forgiving type. But looking at that mug shot, I think you're done. I think we're all done." Down the hall, the sound of a heavy metal door unlocking echoed. "Judge Voss." Lang's voice carried down the corridor, dripping with apology and panic. "Your Honor, I am so sorry. Please step out. Please." "Chief Tariq Lang," came the reply. It was calm, icy, and terrifyingly composed. "I assume you have the keys to these handcuffs, or do we need to wait for the FBI to bring a bolt cutter?" I have them right here," Lang stammered. A moment later, Elara Voss walked into the booking room. She was limping slightly. Her wrists were red and raw, but she walked with the energy of a woman who was about to burn the entire building down with the power of the law. She stopped in the center of the room. She didn't look at the chief. She didn't look at Novak. She looked straight at Officer Blaine. Blaine tried to stand tall, tried to muster some of that arrogance, but it crumbled under her gaze. He felt small. He felt like a child who had broken a priceless vase. "Officer Blaine?" Elara said softly. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the vending machine. "You asked me for identification. You said you knew who belonged in this neighborhood." She reached into the plastic bin on the counter where her belongings had been dumped. She pulled out her wallet, which Blaine had ignored in the car. She flipped it open. The gold badge of the United States Federal Court gleamed under the fluorescent lights. She tossed it onto the desk. It slid across the surface and stopped right in front of Blaine. "Do you believe me now?" Blaine swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I was just doing my job. You fit the description of a... What?" Elara cut him off. "A gardener, a trespasser, or a black woman in a neighborhood you decided she didn't deserve to be in?" Blaine stammered. "Save it for your lawyer." Elara turned to Chief Lang. "Chief, I want this man's badge. I want his gun. And I want the body camera footage secured immediately. If 1 second of that footage goes missing, I will have the Department of Justice turn this police station upside down. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal clear, Your Honor," Lang said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Blaine, gun and badge, now, on the desk." Blaine looked at the chief, betrayal in his eyes. "Chief, you're kidding, right? Over a mistake." "It's not a mistake, Ronan," Lang hissed. "It's a catastrophe. Give me the badge." With shaking hands, Blaine unclipped his holster. He placed his Glock on the counter. Then he unpinned the silver shield from his chest. He laid it next to the gun. "Go home," Lang ordered. "You are on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Get out of my sight." Blaine grabbed his bag and walked to the door. He paused, looking back at Elara. He wanted to say something to defend his ego, but the look on her face stopped him. He pushed through the doors and into the afternoon sun, his career effectively over. But for Elara Voss, the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. She looked at her bruised wrists. "Chief," she said, her voice steady, "I need my phone now. I have to call my husband, and then I need to call the United States Attorney." The emergency room at Northwestern Medicine was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the last 3 hours. Elara sat on the edge of a paper-covered examination table, her gardening clothes now replaced by a hospital gown. Dr. Silas Grant, a specialist in hand surgery, examined the X-rays on the light board. He turned to Elara, his expression grave. "Judge Voss, you have severe soft tissue damage in both wrists," Dr. Grant said, pointing to the shadows on the film. "But more concerning is the compression of the median nerve in your left hand. The handcuffs were applied with such force and for such a duration that you have acute neuropathy. You're going to need physical therapy, and I can't guarantee you'll regain full fine motor skills for months. Writing, typing, holding a gavel, it's going to be painful." Elara looked at her left hand. It was trembling slightly, a tremor she couldn't control. She thought of the hundreds of opinions she wrote by hand before typing them. She thought of the piano she played to relax. "Document everything, doctor," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Every bruise, every millimeter of swelling. I want photographs. I want a prognosis in writing by morning." "I will," Grant promised. By the time Elara got home, it was dark. Barrett, her husband, had flown back immediately upon hearing the voicemail she left. He was waiting in the driveway, pacing. When he saw the police chief's personal car pull up, Lang had insisted on driving her home as a peace offering. Barrett looked like he was ready to fight. "Get off my property," Barrett snarled at Lang as he helped Elara out of the car. "Dr. Voss, please," Lang started. "You heard him," Elara said, leaning heavily on her husband. "And tell your city attorney I'll be expecting him." The city of Ashford Heights didn't wait long. They knew they were sitting on a nuclear bomb. The next morning, a black sedan pulled up. It wasn't the police this time. It was Landon Hale, the city attorney. Hale was a man who had built a career on making problems disappear. He was slick, wearing a three-piece suit that cost more than Officer Blaine made in a month. He carried a leather briefcase and an air of unearned confidence. He expected Elara to be reasonable. After all, she was one of them, part of the legal system. She would understand that these things happen. He was ushered into the living room by Barrett, who didn't offer him water or a seat. Elara was sitting in her armchair, her wrist in a splint. "Judge Voss," Hale began, flashing a practiced smile. "First, let me express the city's deepest regrets. What happened yesterday was unfortunate. A breakdown in communication." "A breakdown in communication," Elara repeated, looking at her splint. "Is that what we're calling assault and battery now, Mr. Hale?" "We want to make this right," Hale said, opening his briefcase. "We value your residency here. We value your service to the bench. We want to handle this quietly with dignity for everyone's sake. You know how the media is. They'll drag your name through the mud just as much as ours." He slid a folder across the coffee table. Elara didn't touch it. "Tell me what's in the folder, Landon." Hale cleared his throat. "It's a settlement agreement. The city is prepared to offer you $50,000 for your pain and suffering. We will cover all medical bills, of course, and we will issue a private letter of apology." He paused, waiting for gratitude. When none came, he added the kicker. "All we ask in return is that you sign a standard non-disclosure agreement. We agree that the incident never happened. No lawsuits, no press. We seal the records. Officer Blaine will be reprimanded internally, sent to sensitivity training, and we all move on." Elara laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. $50,000, she said, and silence. "You think you can buy my civil rights for the price of a mid-sized sedan?" "It's a standard offer for a wrongful arrest," Hale said, his smile faltering. "Actually, it's quite generous. Most get 10. "I am not most, Mr. Hale, and this was not just a wrongful arrest." Elara stood up, wincing as her wrist throbbed. This was a deprivation of rights under color of law. This was a Title 42, Section 1983 violation. This was racial profiling. And you want me to sign an NDA to protect the career of a bigot? We are trying to protect the city's reputation. Hale snapped, losing his cool. If you sue, we will fight. We will depose you. We will dig into your past rulings. We will make this ugly. Do you really want your judicial record scrutinized by the tabloids? It was a threat. A veiled, clumsy threat against a sitting federal judge. Elara looked at Barrett. Barrett smiled. He walked over to the sideboard and picked up his phone, which had been recording video the entire time. Hale's face went pale. You can't record this. This is a settlement negotiation. It's privileged. It's privileged if it's in good faith, Elara said. Threatening a plaintiff with blackmail isn't good faith, Landon. It's extortion. She pointed to the door. Get out and tell the mayor to check the city's insurance policy liability cap, because I'm not suing for $50,000. I'm suing for $5 million, and I'm not signing an NDA. I'm going to make sure the whole world sees exactly what happened in my driveway. Hale grabbed his briefcase and fled. An hour later, Elara called her personal attorney, Vaughn Merritt. Merritt was known in Chicago as the shark in a sharkskin suit. Vaughn, Elara said, file it. File everything and release the body cam footage to the press today. The video dropped on a Tuesday morning. By mid-morning, it had 10,000 views. By noon, it had 3 million. The footage was undeniable. The crisp audio captured every arrogant word Officer Blaine spoke. It captured Elara's calm, reasonable responses. It captured the moment Blaine sneered at her claim of being a homeowner. And most damning of all, it captured the violent takedown. The sound of a federal judge gasping in pain as her face was pressed into the gravel was sickening. The internet did what the internet does best. It exploded. The hashtag #JusticeForVoss began trending worldwide, overtaking celebrity gossip and sports news. But the second hashtag was the one that destroyed the city of Ashford Heights. Fire Blaine. The backlash was immediate and physical. Protesters gathered outside the Ashford Heights police station. News vans from CNN, Fox, and MSNBC lined the streets of the quiet, wealthy suburb. Inside the station, Officer Ronan Blaine was watching his life implode. He was sitting in the union rep's office, staring at his phone. His Instagram was flooded with thousands of comments. His address had been leaked. People were ordering pizzas to his house every 5 minutes. You need to stay off social media, his union rep, a burly man named Carl, warned. Don't say a word. But Blaine couldn't help himself. He was arrogant. And arrogance is a shield that prevents learning. He genuinely believed he was the victim. He believed the video was taken out of context. That night, against legal advice, Blaine posted a 3-minute video to his Facebook page. In the video, Blaine sat in his living room wearing a Blue Lives Matter t-shirt. He looked into the camera and said, "Everyone is judging me based on a 2-minute clip. You don't see what happened before. You don't know how dangerous these situations are." She was aggressive. She disobeyed a direct order. I didn't know she was a judge, but even if she was, nobody is above the law. I was just doing my job to keep this neighborhood safe from intruders. It was the worst possible thing he could have done. Within an hour, the internet detectives had dissected his video. They analyzed his tone. They mocked his defense. But more importantly, they started digging. A user on Reddit found Blaine's old Twitter account, one he thought he had deleted years ago. It was a gold mine of prejudice. Tweet: Why do people who don't belong in nice neighborhoods always act the loudest? #call patrol. Yet, keep it clean. Tweet: Another thug off the streets. They all look the same when they're crying in the back of the cruiser. The screenshots were sent to Vaughn Merritt, Elara's attorney. The next day, Merritt went on national television. He sat across from a primetime anchor looking calm and lethal. "Mr. Merritt," the anchor asked, "the city claims this was an isolated incident, a mistake by a rookie officer." Merritt smiled. He held up a piece of paper. "We have obtained the disciplinary records of Officer Blaine through a subpoena. This is not an isolated incident. In his 3 years on the force, Officer Blaine has made 42 stops of suspicious persons in Ashford Heights. 38 of them were black or Hispanic. None of them were charged with a crime. This isn't a mistake. It's a pattern. It's a policy." The anchor gasped. 38. The city knew, Merritt continued. They knew he was targeting minorities. They knew he was a liability, and they kept him on the street because he was keeping the neighborhood safe. Well, now the bill is due. The fallout was swift. The mayor of Ashford Heights held a press conference. He looked tired. "Effective immediately," the mayor announced. "Officer Ronan Blaine has been terminated from the Ashford Heights Police Department. Furthermore, Chief Tariq Lang has submitted his resignation." But it wasn't enough. The civil suit was moving forward. The deposition of Ronan Blaine was scheduled for 2 weeks later. It took place in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Chicago. Elara sat at the end of the table. Her cast was off, but she wore a compression brace. She didn't say a word. She just watched. Blaine sat opposite her. He looked smaller now. He had lost weight. His fiancée had left him 2 days after the tweet surfaced, unable to deal with the harassment and the shame. He was living in a motel because his landlord had evicted him. Merritt began the questioning. "Mr. Blaine," Merritt said, placing the transcript of the arrest on the table. "On page 4 you stated that Judge Voss didn't look like she lived there. Can you explain to me specifically what a homeowner in Ashford Heights looks like?" Blaine shifted in his seat. I just meant she was dressed sloppy." "Sloppy." Merritt pulled up a photo of a white neighbor, Mr. Henderson, walking his dog in gym shorts and a stained tank top. "This is Mr. Henderson. You waved at him 5 minutes before you arrested Judge Voss. Is he dressed sloppy?" "Yes," Blaine muttered. "Did you ask him for ID?" "No." "Did you throw him to the ground?" "No." "Why?" Blaine stayed silent. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Answer the question," Merritt pressed. "Why was Mr. Henderson safe, but Judge Voss was a suspect?" "Because..." Blaine's voice broke. He looked at Elara for the first time. He really saw her, not as a suspect, not as a symbol, but as a woman he had hurt because of his own rot. "Because I assumed she was help." "And help doesn't have rights?" Merritt asked. "No," Blaine whispered. "I guess not." It was a confession. It was the end. The city attorney, Landon Hale, asked for a recess. He pulled Merritt into the hallway. He looked defeated. "We can't go to trial," Hale said, wiping his face. "The jury will destroy us. If this goes to a verdict, they'll award her $10 million just to spite us." "You're right," Merritt said. "They probably will." "What does she want?" Hale asked. Merritt went back into the room and whispered to Elara. She nodded. She wrote a figure on a piece of paper with her trembling left hand. She slid it across the table to Blaine, not the lawyers. Blaine looked at the paper. 750,000, and a public apology read by you on camera. "That's the number," Elara said. "It's high enough to hurt the city's budget, so you remember it, but it's low enough that the taxpayers don't lose their schools. But the apology, that's for me." The karma had come full circle. Blaine, who had demanded submission, was now being forced to submit to the truth. The air in the private holding room behind the Ashford Heights Community Center stage was stale, recycled, and thick with tension. It was the kind of atmosphere usually reserved for funerals or political scandals. And today, it was a bit of both. Officer Ronan Blaine sat on a folding metal chair in the corner, his head in his hands. He was vibrating, a literal physical shake that started in his knees and rattled all the way up to his teeth. He looked nothing like the swaggering, uniformed predator who had patrolled Crestview Drive just weeks ago. The buzz cut was gone, replaced by a week's worth of patchy, neglectful stubble. His cheap suit, bought hurriedly from a department store clearance rack, hung loosely on his frame. Stress had carved hollows under his eyes, and he reeked of nervous sweat and stale coffee. Across the room, standing by the window, was Judge Elara Voss. She was the picture of serenity. She wore a cream-colored Armani suit that cost more than Blaine's car. Her posture was erect, her expression unreadable. She wasn't looking at Blaine. She was looking out at the parking lot, watching the news vans set up their satellite dishes. "They're ready for us," Landon Hale, the city attorney, said, bursting into the room. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 days. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "Judge Voss, are you sure you want to go through with the Q&A? We can just read the statements and leave. The press is aggressive today." Elara turned slowly. "Mr. Hale, I have faced cartel leaders, domestic terrorists, and corporate fraudsters in my courtroom. I think I can handle a few reporters from Channel 5. The question is, can your client handle it?" She shifted her gaze to Blaine. He flinched as if her look had physical weight. I'll do whatever's in the agreement," Blaine whispered, his voice cracking. "Good," Elara said, walking past him. As she passed, she paused, leaning down so only he could hear. "Remember, Ronan, the microphone picks up everything. Don't mutter. If you're going to apologize, speak up like you did when you were shouting orders at me." The doors opened. The sound hit them first, a wall of noise. The clicking of shutters sounded like a swarm of mechanical locusts. The flashbulbs were blinding, turning the dimly lit auditorium into a strobe-lit nightmare. They walked onto the stage. The room was packed. Standing room only. Every major network was there. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, even a crew from the BBC. This wasn't just a local dispute anymore. It was a global referendum on authority and bias. Elara took her seat at the center of the long table draped in blue cloth. Her husband, Barrett, sat to her right, his hand resting supportively on hers. Her attorney, Vaughn Merritt, sat to her left, looking like a shark smelling blood in the water. Blaine sat at the far end, isolated like a contagious patient. Landon Hale took the podium. He tapped the microphone, a shrill screech of feedback cutting through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hale began, his voice devoid of its usual courtroom theatricality. "We are here today to announce the conclusion of the matter regarding the arrest of the Honorable Elara Voss. The city of Ashford Heights admits no legal liability in terms of policy." A groan went up from the press corps. "However," Hale raised his voice over the rumble, "we acknowledge a catastrophic failure of judgment and procedure on the part of the arresting officer. As such, the city has agreed to a settlement of $750,000. The number hung in the air. Gasps followed. It was a staggering amount for a municipal settlement of this nature. Furthermore, Hale continued, sweating under the lights, "Officer Blaine has a statement to make." Hale stepped back. The room went deathly silent. Blaine stood up. His legs bumped the table, rattling the water pitchers. He walked to the podium as if he were walking to the gallows. He gripped the sides of the lectern so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked out at the sea of lenses, the red recording lights, the judgmental eyes of his former community. He choked. He had to stop to cough, a dry, nervous hacking. "I'm here to apologize." He looked down at the paper his lawyer had written for him. He started to read, his voice monotone and shaky. "On that day, I made a series of mistakes. I profiled Judge Voss based on her appearance. I assumed that because of the color of her skin and her clothing, she did not belong in the neighborhood." He looked up. He saw Elara. She wasn't looking at her notes. She was looking right at him, her eyes piercing through the glare of the lights. It forced him off script. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood," Blaine said, improvising, his voice trembling with genuine emotion. "I thought I was being a good cop, but I wasn't. I was being a bully. I saw a black woman in a nice house and I got angry. I don't know why, but I did. I wanted to put her in her place. Instead, I lost mine." The flashbulbs erupted. That was the soundbite, the confession. "I disgraced my badge," Blaine whispered, tears leaking from his eyes. "I disgraced my family. Judge Voss, I am sorry. I stole your dignity that day. I hope one day you can forgive me." He stepped back, wiping his face, looking broken. The press erupted. Judge Voss, do you accept? What will you do with the money? Is this enough?" Elara leaned forward. She didn't stand up. She didn't need to stand to command respect. She adjusted the microphone with a calm, deliberate hand. "Mr. Blaine," she said, her voice amplified, filling every corner of the room. "Thank you for your statement. It is rare to hear the truth, even when it is forced by a legal settlement." She scanned the room. "You ask if this is enough?" Elara addressed the reporters. "Is $750,000 enough for the humiliation of being handcuffed in your own driveway? For the nerve damage in my wrists that still prevents me from playing the piano? No. Money is not justice. Money is a penalty. It is a fine we levy on stupidity to ensure it becomes too expensive to repeat." She picked up the check which had been placed on the table. She held it up for the cameras. "This money will not buy me a new car. It will not pay off my mortgage. I am donating the full amount, every single cent, to the Equal Justice Initiative and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund." The room broke into applause. Barrett squeezed her hand. "Specifically," she added, silencing the room again, "I am endowing a scholarship for young minority law students. It will be called the Ronan Blaine Scholarship for Civil Rights Defense, so that every time someone says your name, Mr. Blaine, it will be associated with the defense of the very people you tried to oppress." The irony was a physical blow. Blaine slumped in his chair. She had taken his name, his legacy, and inverted it. She had turned his act of hate into a permanent engine for justice. It was the ultimate karma, the aftermath, the long fall. The cameras eventually turned off, but the internet never sleeps. For Elara Voss, life returned to a new kind of normal. She was a hero. Her courtroom became a pilgrimage site for young lawyers. Her wrists healed, though the ache returned when it rained. A permanent reminder of the price of walking while black. For Ronan Blaine, the end of the press conference was just the beginning of the nightmare. He thought the settlement would end it. He thought he could move away and start over. He was wrong. The video of his apology went viral. Viewed over 50 million times, he became the face of bad policing. He moved to a small town in Indiana, 3 hours away, hoping to disappear. He applied for a job as a security guard at a mall. The interview went well until the background check came back. The manager called him in. "We can't hire you, Mr. Blaine," the manager said, sliding a printout of a Google search across the desk. "You're a liability. Our insurance won't touch you." "That was a mistake," Blaine pleaded. "I apologized." We serve a diverse community here, the manager said coldly. Please leave. He tried construction. He lasted 2 days before the other guys on the crew recognized him from TikTok. They froze him out, refusing to work with the judge hunter. He was fired for disrupting team cohesion. 6 months later, Blaine was working the night shift stocking shelves at a warehouse that didn't do background checks. He was earning minimum wage. He lived in a studio apartment with a leaky ceiling. His fiancée had moved on, unable to bear the social stigma of being associated with him. One night, on his break, he sat on a crate in the back alley, scrolling through his phone. He saw a news article. First recipients of the Ronan Blaine Civil Rights Scholarship announced. The photo showed 3 brilliant young law students, 2 black women, and a Hispanic man smiling next to Judge Elara Voss. They looked hopeful. They looked powerful. Blaine stared at the screen. He was stocking toilet paper for a living while his name was paying for the next generation of federal judges to learn how to destroy men like him. He turned off his phone, the bitter taste of regret heavy in his mouth. He had wanted to teach a lesson. He just never realized he would be the student. The final scene. Spring. It was a Tuesday in late May, almost a year since the incident. The weather in Ashford Heights was perfect, 70 degrees and a light breeze. Elara Voss was in her driveway. The scene was almost identical to that fateful day. She was wearing her gardening gloves, kneeling on the pad, tending to the hydrangeas. They were blooming ferociously this year. Deep blues and vibrant purples fed by the compost she had meticulously turned all winter. She heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Elara didn't flinch this time. She didn't freeze. She calmly placed her shears on the grass and stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. It was a police cruiser, Unit 402, the same number. But the window rolled down, and the face that looked out wasn't Blaine. It was a young officer, a woman of color with a kind smile and sharp, intelligent eyes. "Good afternoon, Judge Voss," the officer called out respectfully. "Just doing a patrol? Everything quiet out here?" Elara smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Everything is peaceful, officer," Elara replied. "Just fighting the weeds." "Well, the garden looks beautiful, Your Honor." The officer nodded. "You have a good day." "You too, officer. Stay safe." Elara watched the car roll slowly down the street, waving to the neighbors. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of wet earth and blooming flowers. The fear was gone. The anger had been transmuted into something useful. She looked down at her left wrist. There was a faint scar where the metal had cut into the skin. She rubbed it with her thumb, not in pain, but in remembrance. It was a mark of battle, a mark of victory. She picked up her shears and went back to work. There were still weeds to pull after all. There always would be, but now she knew exactly how to handle them. Wow, talk about instantaneous karma. Officer Blaine thought he could bully someone just because of how they looked, only to find out he was handcuffing one of the most powerful women in the federal court system. It just goes to show you arrogance is a dangerous thing, and you never ever know who you are dealing with. Judge Voss didn't just win a lawsuit. She taught the entire world a lesson in dignity and rights. What would you have done if you were in Elara's shoes? Would you have accepted the apology, or would you have pushed for even more? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice, served ice cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next.